Hello again, my name is Phyllis Kerr, and I've already told you a little bit about my time management program and how I developed it. So let's just get started. So I want to reduce your overwhelm and increase your productivity, and I have a few very simple steps that can help you in that journey to live a calendar-based life. And like I said before, Google me. I like being Googled, and there's a lot I've been doing since 2010 and even before that, way back in the 80s and 90s, because I'm that old. I want to express my understanding of how it is to feel overwhelmed. And I told you a little bit about my story, but if you are having any of these particular problems, then you definitely have some time management issues. If you don't feel any momentum in your personal or professional life, then you really truly, you know this, you need time management skills. But also if your pay ratio is off for the amount of time that you're taking to do something, for the amount that you're being paid, if it doesn't really add up, then you need better time management, because if you can learn to manage your time better, you'll be able to get these things done quicker and therefore give yourself a raise. Now, all of us would like to be feeling like this sitting on the beach in Barbados, and I did work from the balcony, and it was freaking awesome. But time management should feel like this. It should feel easy and comfortable, but most people have a big disconnect when it comes to managing their time, that they don't quite have their feet on the ground when it comes to time. They think that time is something magical and that something extraordinary is going to happen, that they can fit everything on their to-do list in a day. So let's talk about this. The one thing I need you to do as we go forward with these new rules to time management that I've developed is that nothing changes unless you decide to change. Nothing will change unless you're willing to try some of the things I'm going to suggest today. So most people will say, I'm sure it's not as simple as just using my calendar. But I'm here to tell you, it really is. It's really that simple. So living a calendar-based life is simple and easy to implement, but you need to be willing to try. Okay, so let's get started. These are my 6 easy rules to change your life and learn to live a calendar-based life. Rule number 1, put everything on the calendar. Rule number 2, no overlapping. Rule number 3, use only time blocks or individual events, and we'll talk about all of these in a deeper way in just a moment. But this rule number 3 is about how your brain works, and so we'll get into that in just a moment. Rule number 4, set a reminder for everything. Sync your devices is rule number 5, and rule number 6 is always do a weekly review and preview. This one rule, this one change, when I started doing this consistently every week, made me so much more productive just immediately just by following this one rule. So let's get into each of these and see what they're all about. Rule number 1, put everything on the calendar. I really and truly mean everything. A lot of people think, well, I'll put my dentist appointment or I'll put my phone call that I have to do at a certain time on the calendar. But you really need to put everything on the calendar. And if you have clients, maybe your clients need to have their own calendar layer. Now, I'm not going to do a lot of Google Calendar 101 in this webinar, but each client that you have can have their own layer calendar that you can show or not show inside a Google Calendar. So you have to put everything on a calendar. I have a house calendar, I have a client calendar, I have a regular Phyllis Life calendar, I have connections to my husband's calendar and my son's calendar. So I have all these different layers that I can turn on or turn off to see what's going on. But if you're not used to putting things on your calendar, take the first week and just use your calendar as a journal. So on Monday, you did this for a certain amount of time, and then you had lunch, and then you did this for another certain amount of time. No matter what you did, put it on the calendar like a journal, and you'll start to find that your calendar will be showing you stuff that you probably are in denial about. For example, you might find that what you're doing during your day is not contributing to your business. And it'll be very clear if you're willing to try this, to put everything that you do on the calendar. We'll go into more about that in just a minute. But how do you put it on the calendar? Well, there's two big spaces to put what you do in a space on the calendar. The first one is the title, and the other is the description. So depending on what it is that you're doing, you can use the title to put everything that you've done, and or you can put everything that you've done inside the description area. For example, this one says pre-launch content creation. And inside the description area, I've put find and source the images, create the images, do the keyword research, write the drafts, create the video animations, and schedule everything. That's a lot inside of that one particular thing. Now, if I'm going to put this on my calendar, or this is a journal of what I did during this time, probably this is a couple of hours, at least a couple of hours, maybe more, on my calendar. You can, as we'll find out in just a minute, do things a little bit differently. So you can either put the whole task that you do in the calendar title, or you can put it in the description area. Keep that in mind. And as you're putting this on your calendar, be generous with your time. Again, if you're using it as a journal this first week, then you just put the exact time it took you to do these things. But if you're planning for the future, be generous with your time, especially in the beginning, because most people don't realize how long it takes to do things. Rule number 2, no overlapping for less stress. So what this means is, like I said, if I have all these different calendars and I turn them all on, then anything that's overlapping is mentally stressful, emotionally stressful, and physically in your time stressful. So if you turn them on and you are in some way responsible for the things on those calendars, you can't have things overlap. Just looking at this image underneath this red X just gets me stressed. So we want to make sure that things look more like this, okay? This is what we want. Plenty of room between things and lots of space to do the things that we need to do. Now, in the beginning, your calendar is not going to look like this, especially if you're doing with step number 1, rule number 1, which is put everything on the calendar. You might find that this doesn't look like your calendar, and that's okay. We're just going to keep going with this. So you're going to add those other calendar layers in if you're using them, and adjust them so that there's no overlapping. It's really very important to do. Rule number 3. This is where you have to understand how your particular brain works. Either you're the kind of person who likes to sit down and do a project and just do it till it's done, which means if you have a video or a podcast or a blog or something that you're creating, then that might take you all day long, because remember, it's not just creating it, it's also doing the marketing and scheduling and doing all the things that need to be done. So if your brain works like some people, they just, like, one day, Monday, they only focus on a blog post, and that's just all that they do all day long. Good for them. I'm not that person. I'm the kind of person who needs to break up the tasks and do them at different times. So inside of the task of creating a blog post, there's a bunch of different things. Okay, so you might and I'm going to go over this in a little bit, how a blogger would do it, but maybe there are 5 moving parts to creating a blog post. The writing, sourcing the images, getting the keywords, doing the editing, putting it up as a draft, having somebody look at it, scheduling it, and then the marketing aspect. I actually take each one of those parts of the blogging process and put them as separate times on my calendar. And then that way, if something happens in my life, which sometimes it does, I can just easily move something to a different spot. Now, also realize that if you move things from day to day and keep moving them away from getting them done, this is where your calendar is talking to you. Your calendar is screaming to you actually, hey, Why are you avoiding this? Are you just not skilled in this and are procrastinating? Are you need to outsource this thing? Are you afraid to do this thing? What is it? What is that internal block that makes you keep moving things? Rule number 4, setting a reminder for everything. I remember when I first got started, I had all my devices on and reminders set up for all of them. And so all 5 of the devices would, do their little notification sounds all at the same time, 10 minutes before each new thing on my calendar. And I had to change that after a while. It was really like being in the clockmaker shop. But really and truly, setting reminders is good. Now you can adjust this for how it fits for you, and I have found that in my life that 10-minute notification has been working great. But recently I've also added a 1-minute notification because inside of those 10 minutes when I should be wrapping it up and moving to the next thing, sometimes I get even more deeply involved or distracted, so I need that 1 more minute reminder. And so I have 2 notifications set up now for every event that's coming up in my calendar. You should figure that out for how it works for you. And if you prefer email, you can do it that way. If you prefer having both, then you can do it that way. This is custom designed to however it fits your brain. Rule number 5. Now this used to be a hard thing to do long ago and far away, and that was to sync your devices. But now it's really very easy to do, especially with Google Calendar with the One Google account. And so I wouldn't worry about that too much. But on the settings on your mobile device, you need to check and make sure that all the calendar layers that you have on your desktop are also visible on mobile. So that's an extra step that you definitely need to do. Rule number 6, always do a weekly review and preview. So like I said earlier, this particular step really changed my life, and that is to take a moment. I tend to do it on a Sunday night, and I review what happened during the week. Now, if anything didn't get done during the week, my personal rule is if I put it on the calendar, that means it's important and it needs to get done. So I can't just delete it or ignore it or leave it into last week. I have to look at it and say, okay, I didn't do it. And so slide it over to a day this upcoming week to get it done. Then I look at the upcoming week and I see what's there. And if you're like me, and like a lot of people, you feel a compulsion to fill up empty spaces. Try to resist that compulsion, because you need empty spaces for when things get moved or things come up. You need to have a place to put them. Now, filling up your calendar so that every space is filled up with something to do is another way your calendar is telling you, hey, you're a little bit busy here. Where is the self-care? Where are you taking care of yourself? Make sure those things are on your calendar too. The cool thing about living a calendar-based life is your calendar, if you pay attention to it and you put everything on it, seriously, everything on it, it will tell you when you're overbooked. When you get an email and says, hey, can we talk this Tuesday? And you look at your calendar and there's nothing you can move on Tuesday and nothing you can move on Wednesday and nothing you can move on Thursday, then you're overbooking yourself. So that is an indication that, okay, in my next week, I'm going to try and give myself some more buffer time, and I'm going to stop trying to get so much done in a day and spread things out a little bit. It'll also tell you when you're avoiding a certain type of task. If you keep sliding calendar events over and Friday ends up, like jam-packed full of stuff that you didn't get done that week, that means you're avoiding something. This is a really good indication that maybe there are parts to your business that you need to outsource, you need to have someone else do. It's also a really clear indication if you are setting up your week and you're giving yourself good time blocks to get things done, but you never get them done inside of the time you think it's going to take. That just shows you you're not being very realistic about time, and that you really don't have your feet on the ground. Now, this is a grandma smackdown right here, that you really don't have your feet on the ground and know how much time something takes. The cool thing about Google Calendar, again, is if you're in the middle of that task and it gets to the end of the time that you scheduled it, but you're not done, you can drag it down for another length of time and then continue working. Now remember, if that overlaps with another thing that you're going to do, you have to move that other thing down because you're not allowed to overlap in the system. So if you do the work and you're not done and you drag it down to finish the work, now you can look at that and say, oh, well, writing those 2 scripts for YouTube actually takes me 2 hours instead of an hour and a half. And then going forward, when you schedule that, you will put 2 hours down there. Now through time, you might find that you've scheduled 2 hours for writing those YouTube scripts, and all of a sudden you're very quick and now it only takes you an hour. Good, adjust it. That's the value of the adjustable time slots on a Google Calendar, is you become very connected to what time really is and how much you're getting done. If you use these simple steps and use your calendar as a way to manage your time in the way I've just described, then you will get more done in less time with less stress. Now, there's a whole bunch of stuff to this. I've really just kind of touched on a little bit of it, but I want you to know that I have an entire playlist on YouTube that is all these different ways you can use Google Calendar for blogging, for really taking control of your own life, for successful planning. All of this I have on this Google Calendar training program, and you can just go through them and enjoy them and learn a lot there too. I also have Time Bliss. Time Bliss Without Me is a way to really deep dive into this and get lessons on each of those new rules. I also have coaching. I have a lot of people who just really need me there to help them get things on the calendar and make this work for them. So, bloggers, vloggers, and podcasters, woohoo! I have a few little advanced ideas to kind of keep you sane, so I want to go over those right now real quick. Batching. Everybody's heard about batching. Everybody knows, oh, batching. But how does that look on a calendar? Okay, so you have to go back to that rule where you decide if you are a one-time block person or you're a multiple task person. On the left, you see an image where you just work on the task all day long. That's just it. You just focus all day long. You're doing all the bits and pieces of that. On the right side, you see where all those tasks are broken up into individual tasks on the calendar. So on Monday, you write 2 scripts, and then on Tuesday, you record them, and then you record the recaps for IGTV, and you use the audio for the flash briefing. In other words, you get all the raw stuff recorded on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, you can see that you do all the editing. And you can see what a huge time block I put into that one, because that's the thing that takes me personally the longest to do. And then on the next day, one of them goes live, and then the flash briefing goes live, and then I have a 2-hour time block where it's all scheduled out through time, so that it's not just a one post and then it's done. So for me, I like the individual time blocks, but maybe you can combine all of those and get all of that done all day from 10 to 5. Good luck with that. More power to you. I mean, if you can do that, that's amazing. I'm very impressed. Also, if you're using Google Calendar for vlogging, blogging, or podcasting, you need to learn to rock the recurring feature inside of Google Calendar, where you can develop these time blocks or these tasks and have them repeat every week. And you can repeat them. For me, I have them repeat every 2 weeks, so that I have 1 week where I'm totally focused on YouTube videos, and then I have a week off, and then I have a week on, and then I have a week off, and that's what works for me. And you can totally set that up inside of the date and the recurring feature inside of Google Calendar. So again, back to the willingness. Really, if you can, jump in with 2 feet on this one, because there are so many people, once they've learned to live a calendar-based life, their whole life has changed. So there are 2 things you need to remember to say going forward. Number one, no matter what anybody says to you, learn to say, let me check my calendar. Just say it. Everybody, let me check my calendar. Always check in before you say yes to something. Because if somebody's asking you to do something and you just say, yes, that's a great idea, I can do it, and then later you go back to your calendar and you have no room to do it, then that is really not being a realistic person. So, let me check my calendar is one phrase you should get used to saying all the time. The other thing that you should try and check yourself on is whenever you hear yourself obligating yourself to anything at all, then check that and say, oh, let me check my calendar. Or if you say, yes, I definitely can do that guest post, then go straight to your calendar and find a spot for it. So in other words, you start becoming more integrated with your calendar, checking in with your calendar, making sure you have time for it. That's a really important process to do going forward with this system. And there's just one more thing I want to talk about, and that is a lot of people use a to-do list. I'm totally fine with creating a to-do list in any way, shape, or form that you want to do it, even inside of Google Calendar, the task list. But I also consider that a first step. It is not the final step, and it will not make you more productive. A to-do list needs to be moved into a spot on your calendar where it actually gets done. And that's the way you become more productive.